Yeah, well, actually, I think they're kind of interrelated in the sense that when there's a big political change, that often leads to cultural change, which influences the church. And like one of the first example that comes to mind is with same-sex marriage. Like conservative Christians generally, opposed homosexuality before same-sex marriage was legalized, and many still do. But same-sex marriage gets legalized, and then there's cultural and political waves that come from that. Politically, for example, once it was legalized, then it was inevitable that there would be more homosexual influences in the schools. And like, for example, the GSA issue, those are being compelled into Alberta schools right now. That's kind of part of the consequences of same-sex marriage being legalized, because you have this special legal status given to a particular relationship between two men. Then that legal relationship has to have in the schools. It has to have the same recognition as a heterosexual relationship because the government has legalized it. So when sex education is taught or something like that, it has to give equal representation to the homosexual view as opposed to the heterosexual view that had exclusively been there before. So when you have a major change like same-sex marriage, it has sweeping effects in different areas of politics and society. Also, too, after same-sex marriage was legalized, there's kind of like a bandwagon effect for people. When something wins politically, people tend to be drawn more to that side than they were before. And so more and more people are accepting same-sex marriage, like much more now than even 10 years ago, just as a consequence of it being legalized. And so there's a cultural swing where a larger percentage of the population are willing to go along with it because of the legal change. And because that influences the population, that also creeps into the churches. And even pastors will become loath to criticize something that's very popular. Like right now, homosexual relationships are, relatively speaking, quite popular in the sense that people don't want to criticize that. And if people don't want to, pastors aren't going to be wanting to criticize that either. And now that I think of it, this ties into the One Accord meeting we were at, is that many pastors were invited, and many came, but there were some who explicitly did not want to come because they have been influenced by the culture that they don't want to oppose publicly homosexuality because of the consequences for their potential consequences for them and their congregation. So it affects a big political change, has a cultural change, leads to other political and cultural changes that do influence the church in a negative way.